Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 19 of That Moment, Heart to Heart Talk with Victoria Grinman. And today I am here with Sara Deren. Sara, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted.
Yeah, I am so uber excited to have you on because you are the reason for why my years are probably the best the last 5 years. For the last 5 years, have been a clinician at experience camps, which you are the mastermind founder of. And I'm just so excited to have you here and share a little bit about just who you are in this world. What's your story, Sara?
Gosh, where do I begin? Well, I'm so happy to hear you say that. And obviously, this past summer, I'll tell you a little bit about experience camps in a minute for those who don't know, but not having opened this summer because of COVID and everything that was going on, I've missed my people. So I'm so happy to see you. I'm so happy that, everybody's thinking about it and getting excited for the summer because I sure am, and can't wait to get back as well. So who am I? So, I guess starting with kind of the experience camp story, going way back. So I was actually like a computer science major in college. This was not my path or my journey that I expected to take. I'm more of like an analytical thinker, not really an entrepreneurial or even at the time, like a nonprofit thinker. It just never crossed my mind. And, one thing led to another throughout my career, which kind of led me to financial services and project management. And again, like very analytical things. And I found my way to business school where I met my soon-to-be husband, who was and is a camp owner and director. And, really found myself on a very different path and sort of planted a lot of seeds along the way of kind of what bloomed into experience camps and as it is now. But at the time, we had talked. I remember talking to him when we were still dating and maybe engaged at that point. And, I had my corporate job in New York City and he was in Maine all summer. And I was like, how is this going to work? Like, this can't work. How could this work? And he's like, it'll just work out. Like, that's a ridiculous thing to say. It's like, it's like not the way that my brain functioned at the time, right? It was just like, no, it doesn't just work out. You have to make plans and you have to make things happen. And lo and behold, it kind of just worked out. And come 2008, I was very pregnant with my first child and working at a financial services behemoth, and got laid off from my job as many people did in 2008. And that it was one of those silver lining moments for me. It was, somewhat devastating at the time, but also it gave me an answer that I had been asking and wasn't sure of how to go with that, which was like, how am I going to merge my corporate world into the camp world? How can I do this? And it sort of took that out of my hands for at least the time being. And what it allowed me to do was sort of open up my thinking in that moment to say, like, well, what can I do? What are the other things that are on the table for me? And, camp was coming, summer was coming, and I found myself at camp for the first time for a full summer with a new baby. But
you had never been to camp prior to that? Like, you were not a camp person?
I never went to camp as a kid.
Wow.
My first time setting foot on a summer camp property was when I was dating John, my husband.
Wow.
So it was totally foreign to me. And I didn't want to just come into camp and be like, I'm the wife now and I'm here to direct things. It wasn't what I knew. And I didn't want to also just kind of make my mark that way. But at the same time, I'd had this really great, career up to that point in something that was interesting to me, but wasn't terribly fulfilling. Mm-hmm. So now here we had this moment where I was like, let me take a step back. I live it now, at least in the summer, in this place where I'm witnessing phenomenal growth in little humans every single day. You see these moments where camp is just sort of transforming and building their character and teaching values, and you'd see these amazing things happen. And I was also able to really reflect and say, like, and these are the kids, at least at this camp, that can afford to come here. Like, this isn't available to everybody. There's a huge gap in who can experience that quality of an experience at summer camp. So my husband and I kind of put our heads together and, just said, like, let's just start something. This will be my thing. let's start a nonprofit. Let's start an organization that that we can help, that we can bring kids to camp who otherwise wouldn't get to go to camp. And it was one of those moments actually where John was like, let's start, and I was like, you can't just start a nonprofit. He's like, yeah.
He's like, you can.
So I've learned a lot from kind of rolling into those moments. So we started a nonprofit, and as we were kind of developing the concept and figuring out what to do, there was a girls' camp in Maine, which is where our summer camp is, that was reaching out to some boys' camps and saying, we've been running this grief camp. We're looking for a brother program to partner with us, to do this alongside us. And there were just enough things that lined up that we were like, yeah, that makes sense. Most people are usually expect that it was something that was triggered by my, the loss of my parents, sibling, et cetera. And that wasn't it. It was, we had an opportunity, and there was a moment, and it made sense. You could see as a human, like, oh yeah, grieving children coming together in a place where everybody understands and everybody can get it. And they have this platform of camp to build on, right? The play, the community, that camaraderie that is so inherent in the camp experience. Like, yeah, that makes sense. And it just kind of started rolling from there.
First of all, I've never heard that story. And so for me, after 5 years of being involved, I'm like, oh, what an incredible journey. And there's something very special about experience camps. So for those of you who have not heard me just go on and on about experience camps, it is a grief camp for kids who have lost a significant person in their life, right? And it's a free 1-week experience every summer. And I have noticed, just being a part of experience camps specifically, and I've been a camper my whole life. I mean, I can talk about the love of camp, right? There's something very unique that happens at experience camps where you actually just said it. We always say, like, there's something special about being around people who just get it. Mm-hmm. And so how is it that you develop the culture? Because you have different locations in different places. How is it that the culture of experience camps, the feeling of experience camps, yes, it's unique from place to place because of the different people and climate and environment, but there are these tenets that are just like very much the same, and it's strung throughout. How did you develop that, and how do you keep that so intact?
I love that question. I think the culture is made up of the people that are influential in guiding an organization. And when I think back to some of the moments that have defined the culture and that have now carried forward, like you said, into all those other locations, there's definitely some things that stand out, but it's also like a million little moments of that culture playing out. For starters, kind of like what I just said, I think the camp foundation allows that culture to come through. You're bringing together a group of people of a similar mindset, but also incredible individuality and difference. And you're bringing them together with a shared something, right? In this case, it's grief. Everybody there, from the second they walk onto the camp, grounds, that they get off the bus, they know everyone around them has been through something similar to them. So there's just sort of that shared underlying understanding that unites. Which I think is really powerful. And then, especially for kids and really for adults, the premise of camp is that we lead with play, right? Mm-hmm. Before we expect kids to get together and start having these therapeutic clinical moments, we're like, here's a ball, like, go throw it at each other, and like, I think that breaks down a lot of boundaries that leads to openness, especially with children. Like, developmentally, that's what's going to open them up and lead to those moments of connection when they can trust through their play that they have that shared language. But then there's just, like I said, there's been those moments throughout the year. I can think back to, in particular, the first year of camp. So it's 2009. We have 27 campers, mostly the brothers of those girls at the girls' camp that I mentioned. We had 30 volunteers, like very high camper to counselor ratio, counselor to camper ratio. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't say we were winging it. Like, we knew camp really well. We had all of our clinical staff in place, like the people that can guide the bereavement and the grief aspect. But we were just sort of following what we knew to be right, like play and talking and just being there, being really present for these kids and for each other. And the things that followed were in particular, the one that stands out, and I know actually I think Dan Wolfson was on this show not too long ago, was our final campfire. And we gathered everybody into what was then known as Indian Village. It's like a little village of split logs nestled in the woods. It's very intimate. There's this like crackling campfire, and it was the final moment of the week. We'd had all this play and activity and the closeness, like everybody had gotten so close that week in this very short period of time. And we had a loose kind of program set up for the campfire for people to speak. And Dan had been a camper at the camp that we were doing this at Manitou, and knew some of the traditions that we had used, one of which was called a letter home. So this is where, even at regular Manitou, somebody would write a letter to somebody who wasn't at camp. It was typically like their parents, and read this letter. And it was really kind of to bring the essence of camp out into that community in that moment, by kind of like as if you were sharing it with somebody that wasn't there. I think oftentimes those letters got mailed, sometimes they didn't. But anyway, in this iteration, this version of it, Dan wrote a letter to his mom who had died when he was a teenager, and read it in front of the camp. And a couple things happened. One is that, so me and I think it was Jenny and Josh, like our leadership team, was like sitting up at the very front. Dan's reading this letter. Everybody is sobbing. It's like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night at this point. The whole camp gets up and like surrounds him when he finishes the letter. It's a really beautiful moment. And we're all looking, me and like Josh and Dan, we're like, oh, what do we do? Like, these kids are hysterical. They're going home tomorrow. We ruined camp. Like, back to the bunks. We need to like wrap this up and put a bow around it and make sure and like we really thought we had done like permanent clinical damage to these kids by opening this box of like grief, right? Like, and which we've been kind of peeling back throughout the week, but not in such a communal fashion, not in such a big way. So we all went back to the bunks, filed out of the village, went back to the bunks. And literally by the time the kids got back to the bunks, they were like whipping towels at each other and like swinging for, they were able to so beautifully transition from that sort of cathartic moment of grief and pain back into like childhood and joy. And so when you talk about like what defines the culture, that moment of openness, resilience, understanding the yin and yang of grief and the balance that is needed, and the way that kids so naturally adapt to that, informing and educating the adults in the room or in the amphitheater at that point, right? Like that's all I can take each of those elements that happen in that moment and like directly align it with one of like our fundamental principles now as the organization has grown. Like, so point being, like we've developed the culture from the authentic moments that have happened and the way that people have shown up at various steps along the way. The way that they've showed up with authenticity and openness and just like really being in it and being really good people. Like if you look at the average, grief camp counselor, they're really good people. Like jerks don't go to grief camp. They just don't. You're like just surrounded by good people who are there for the kids, that are there for the right reason, and everything else is built on top of that.
Yeah. And one of the things that I love, and as you're talking about the fire, and I'm just thinking of all of the campfires and all of the incredible moments, you could just get chills thinking about it, because the connection, the connectivity is just palpable. And how important it is for kids to learn how to be self-expressed. And I don't just mean like verbally, but just as beings, right? We all have this birthright. And then somehow along the way, something happens and we just kind of like either clam up or learn not to talk about it or learn to like be a certain way. And what I've noticed over time in this amazing, beautiful, magical space for 1 week, which feels like forever, and then you just get so sad leaving one another, is this like blossoming, whether it is verbally or in the arts or at the talent show or just in the way that, there's sharing that's going on, or just growth, from the inside out. I'm thinking of like particular kiddos I love, and like some of them are twins, and just watching their individual journeys, kind of go like this and then collide, and they learn how to deal with things within a group and also within themselves. It's just incredible what you guys have created. How do you keep that going throughout the year? And this is something that I think about often. I'm not in the administrative end of it, so I don't even know how, like, what goes on behind the scenes, but how do you keep that alive throughout the year and then, bring it back every summer?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the challenges that we're still addressing, as we think about how we want to grow as an organization, how we can continue to reach kids throughout the year. We call it Beyond the Bunk. Interestingly enough, this year, not last year, 2020, gave us a new type of permission to really dive into that, because we went virtual, because we had to fill in some of the gaps that were left by not having camp. And we were like, well, we've got to do everything we possibly can. So we added more things, moments to our kids' year so that we can keep them connected and sort of bridge the year between camps. And that's always been sort of our primary goal, is to bridge the year, where camp is sort of the primary injection, the injection of the fun and the support and all the things that we package into camp. And that what goes on between that is just to kind of keep the embers glowing, right? And give that, we do bunk reunions. This year, those were virtual bunk reunions. So all of a sudden, our 2 in-person bunk reunions, which, frankly, we didn't have a huge turnout for those because there's a lot of barriers to attendance, especially because we are, in 35 different states around the country. So even though we operate in 5 states, there's, that's a lot of travel for a lot of people if they're not in those direct areas. But now, oh my gosh, we're doing virtual camps. So now we're doing virtual, bunk programs. So now, everybody can come. So there was some of that that's been happening. We send them a countdown to camp poster. We send postcards throughout the year. We offer crisis support when moments are happening, nationally or in the news. We stay connected, and we ensure that when they go home, they know, that your community is there throughout the year. We talk a lot about invisible strings. It's actually based on a children's book that talks about how everybody's connected. Their hearts are connected by these invisible strings that you can't see, but you can feel with your heart. And what a beautiful way to talk about grief, for one thing, and the people that are no longer with us physically. But it also allows us to talk about how we as a community are connected. That even when we are not together in the school year, when we're not sitting next to each other at a campfire or in a sharing circle, we're still connected. And that's what we really want kids to take away with them, to sort of bridge. That's the strongest way to bridge the gap between the years. And then we kind of pepper in the reminders, we're still here, through social media, through those physical reminders, whether it's a mailing or a moment of a virtual something. We just want them to know we're still here and find the connections themselves. That's another big part of it, is that we're trying to create a world where the people around them are supportive enough, just like at camp, that we would want them to experience, and that they can, buddy,
hey, we do these things at home.
That's perfect. And that they are able to find the strength in themselves to kind of extend their own strings in new ways in the physical places that they are, either with their families, their school friends, their teachers, etc. That they know how to sort of advocate for themselves in that moment too.
I love that. Do we want to say hi?
Do you want to say hi? Do you want to say hi? Okay, then. It's our dog's birthday, so it's a big moment around here. Everybody's very excited.
Totally got it. I'm just thinking about the mailing that you guys sent for the winter season. I wrap myself up in that blanket all the time, and anytime I put on that candle, I think about the fire. And it's an incredible community to be a part of. And going back to you, I was wondering if you can just highlight what has happened to you since that first moment that you opened camp till now. What has transpired in this analytical corporate planners space, life? How has that transformed you?
I mean, everything has transformed. From that moment, and again, that first year I had a new baby. I've had 2 others since then. So my family life completely transformed. The way I moved out of the city and into the, so even at a personal level, like everything changes, I think, in most people's identities over between their 20s to their 30s to their now 40s. But on a professional level, oh my gosh, everything. I mean, my whole way of thinking and my whole way of being has completely changed with this. One is that I lead with entirely with my purpose now. Um, I think when I graduated college and took those jobs initially, and I was definitely like aligning naturally, I think, my strengths in those times, but I was also like, I wanted to make money. I wanted to like build a career. I had this sort of this different purpose, I guess, at the time. Now my mission is my purpose. The ability to make a difference in the world is my purpose. And that was not as clear to me then as it is now. But I think that's evolved every year that I interact with our community, and that I'm absorbing little bits of their stories and their experiences into my own. Their stories have become my story. Their experiences have become my experience. So I think that's probably at the complete, top and bottom of my journey, is that drive, that mission, passion. My way of thinking, though, has also completely changed. I mean, I was raised by two school teachers, and with a mindset of kind of like stability and sort of risk aversion in a way. Like you go, you follow a certain path that is mission driven. Ironically, that's that kind of came full circle. But risk was always really uncomfortable for me, and I think John, my husband, I think taught me a lot about that. Going back to not be like, it'll just work out in a haphazard way, but like trust that it's going to work out because you've actually got the tools to make it work out. And that's something that I had to learn, and sort of find my own confidence in, is that I know what I'm doing and I can do this. And yeah, you can just start a nonprofit. Like if you have the right people and the right circumstances, you can do that. Whereas, back in the day, I don't think I ever would have considered like how to start a business, how to grow a business. I mean, we've grown from, me as a volunteer back in the early days to a full-time team of 10 and a part-time team of 25. Wow. We've grown from, a $0 budget to, probably be close to $3 million budget this year. Like there's so much growth that has happened. And I've had to kind of grow with that, right? Or lead that growth in a way, but it kind of went a little bit like this, like a little bit me growing, a little bit it growing, and each of us catching up to the other. But the way I think, sort of my entrepreneurial spirit has emerged from this experience, and now it's on fire. Like now I can't wait to do more, but it wasn't always how I was. It wasn't how I started.
And in those early days, when it was like this, right? Like you're teetering from like really being on fire to, oh, that wasn't, as great as I thought it was going to be. And you're kind of going back and forth. What kept you going? Like what just kept you motivated and inspired?
The people around me.
Okay. Yeah.
I've always had really good people along on this ride with me. From the early days, Josh Hahn as a program director, and he worked full time with us for a little while. Jenny, just everybody that has come into contact. Like I said, I never have to deal with jerks. Like there's everybody that comes into this organization, and I mean, look at my full time team now, and any one of them you talk to, they're like, I love this job. Like I love what I do and I don't think they're just saying that to me. Like I think they mean it. But people come into this for all the right reasons, and that inspires me every single day. And like I want to be in service of them as much as the kids that we serve and their caregivers, because this organization is made up of all of the people. It's the campers, it's their caregivers, it's our volunteers, it's our staff, it's everybody that has and continues to define that culture. And like I just love being a part of that. The fact that I get to lead it is a privilege, but being a part of that is like my greatest joy.
Yeah, I love when you come and visit. It's like, ooh, Sarah's here. And it's usually during the last campfire or something around that time, and it's such a special moment. One last big question I really would love to know, has there been a kiddo or a family that, I don't know, you met and or you worked with or you witnessed grow, and it just like really left a mark on you and just your experience?
Gosh, like all of them. I don't know if I could pick just one. Um, I mean, personally speaking, so a few years into operating experience camps, my brother's wife died, and my nephew became one of our campers.
Mm.
So, it was interesting because when he would come to camp, I would try to give him a lot of space because, like, he doesn't need Aunt Sarah kind of looking over his shoulder, and I wanted him to have the same experience as every other camper. So, I wouldn't say I got to like directly witness all of his growth in the time that he came, that his moments at camp, but I also knew that he came back every year, and he all the way from New Jersey to Maine, and that this was something that I could give somebody in my family, somebody that I was directly connected to in grief, this opportunity. And that was something that was extra special and extra hard at the same time, having sort of taken all the grief theory I learned over the years, and all of a sudden, like, this was happening to us, this was happening in our family. um, so that was something unique, and again also special, that I was able to offer something, not only to all these kids that would come, but to him, that he needed in that moment. And that also continues to be what drives me. Like, I want every kid who experiences something like this, experiences this type of grief, to have a place to go where they feel supported, whether that's experience camps or that they're able to find the connections of the things that work for them, but that
Mhm.
the platforms exist for them to come together, be with other kids who get it, find hope, build resilience, and like just choose a path forward that is full of joy.
Mm.
And yeah, I want that for every kid, but that one certainly stands out for me.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, and I think that the grief journey itself can be so isolating and lonely because there's no one that's the same, right? But being in a situation and an environment where people all get that it's different and allow the space for that, um, I just I'm present to how you don't just offer that to the kids or the staff, but there's a culture that you're creating just as it emanates right outward, around grief is not a dirty word, and grief, and it doesn't have to be something that we keep quiet and to ourselves. It's a universal experience that we go through when there's loss, right? And there's joy inside the journey, and it and it ebbs and it flows kind of like water, like you can't even tell the difference sometimes.
Mhm.
I just remember we are playing basketball and then we go to a sharing circle, and then after the sharing circle and people are kind of like tearful, we're going to a talent show, and it's like it's all mixed in. And I think that that's what creates just the ease, the flow, the freedom. And so what you're doing is incredible. And what, leaving people off with just something to think about, or is there a quote or just a mantra or something a message that you'd like to leave everyone off with today?
I mean, it's not really a quote, but I think it's exactly to what you're saying, is talk about grief.
Mm-hmm.
It is historically and traditionally such a taboo topic in so many cultures, and yet that's the reason that kids are feeling isolated, because we're not talking about it. And when you can sort of lean into that, whether it's with somebody who is grieving and just being brave enough to say, like, how are you today? Like, tell me about your person, tell me a story. Or if you are the grieving person, to step into that and share your experience with other people and connect through that. I find that some of my most authentic and deep conversations come from when people find out what I do for a living, and they're like, ooh, grief, like, let me tell you about mine. People are seeking out those human connections, and grief is such a unifying way to connect. And it's such a real thing, and it's something that needs to be talked about. And that's part of what our mission is now, is really helping to create a society around our kids when they leave camp, that they can
Mm-hmm.
still share their stories, that they don't have to feel stigmatized in whatever type of death loss they experience. And many are, they do feel, whether it's suicide or homicide, or there's so many that they feel like they need to keep quiet. And we want to tell people and remind people you don't need to be quiet about it. Like, share your stories and connect with people. It's where that vulnerability is where the human connection lives.
Beautiful. Thank you. And how can people find you, Sara? And is there anything specific that's going on right now inside of experience camps that you would like to let people know about? Or is there anyone particular that you're looking for to help drive that mission forward even more? And if they're listening, to get in touch with you?
Wonderful question. We're still bringing on volunteers for next summer. We're actually hoping to keep growing even further beyond where we are. So definitely volunteers. If you want to apply to be a volunteer, I think our website's right there at the bottom of the page, experiencecamps.org. You don't have to have had experienced a loss or grief to volunteer. You need to be a decent human with no criminal record and just somebody who wants to show up for kids. And, connections to other good people. That's kind of what we've always been built on, whether it comes to funding opportunities, which, yes, we need money to keep operating. That's always appreciated as well. But just the connections to different partnerships, organizations that connect with volunteers, other camper opportunities, et cetera. So really, we welcome any kind of introduction, any kind of idea. We're open to all those different human connections and to see where they go, because you just never know.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. This was an incredible conversation.
This was fun.
Yeah. And I really hope, I'm just putting this out there into the universe, that we will be in person this coming summer, playing ball, enjoying, I don't know, fist bumping or elbow bumping or whatever it is we have to do. I hope that we do it together. Thank you again, Sara, for being here, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for having me. Take care.